Hi guys, welcome back to the Shark. No, I'm so used to Shark Attacks. It's I survived the Great Molasses Flood of 1919.
You really messed that up.
I did.
This is Boston Harbor. Map illustration detail. They show where the north end is. They show a molasses tank. Looks like it's on shore. What is this page over here?
Boring.
Alright, chapter 1.
Wednesday, January 15, 1919, around 12:30 p.m., the North End, Boston.
12-year-old Carmen Grasso was drowning. She was caught in one of the deadliest disasters in the history of Boston. A gigantic wave had crashed into the streets, a swirling, raging monster moving faster than a train. It turned buildings to rubble. It smashed wagons and motor cars and tossed trucks into the harbor. 21 people would soon be dead. Many more would be fighting for their lives. This killer wave wasn't made of water. It didn't come from the sea. The monstrous wave was made of a thick brown syrup, molasses. For years, millions of gallons of sticky molasses had been stored in a building-sized metal tank. The hideous tank loomed over Carmen's neighborhood, blotting out the sun. And in one ear-splitting moment, the molasses tank had exploded apart. Carmen and her best friend Tony had watched in horror as the tank began to shake, as its rounded steel sides bulged in and out. The tank seemed to have come alive, as if it was boiling with fury, ready to destroy. And then suddenly, thousands of the steel bolts that had held the tank together let go. Bang, 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 bang!
Bang.
They blasted through the air like bullets fired from a machine gun. Seconds later, the metal tank blew apart completely. Jagged chunks of metal whirled through the air like knife-winged birds. The molasses hovered in the air like a black, roiling cloud, and then with a thundering crash, it hit the ground. Instantly, the streets became raging rivers filled with wreckage. Chunks of wood, metal, and glass overturned motor cars and wagons. Horses whinnied in fear. What's a whinny sound like? That's what a horse sounds like? I don't even know that either. Oh, that's it. Something like that. Screams of terror rang out. Run! Get out of the way! Help me! Carmen ran for his life. Tony right behind her. But the wave was moving too fast. Within seconds, the swirl of thick syrup had caught them. The molasses wrapped itself around Carmen's legs like millions of powerful snakes dripping with slime. It rose up her waist to her chest. She had to do something. And then she saw it. A broken wagon floating toward them. She and Tony managed to climb on until a huge chunk of metal from the tank rammed into the wagon. Carmen tried to hold on as the wagon nearly flipped, but she slipped off and sank into the swirling flood of ooze. Carmen! Tony screamed. It was the last sound Carmen heard as the molasses rose up over her head and swallowed her whole.
Chapter 2. Almost 4 months earlier. What the heck? Why would they do us 4 months earlier? That's ridiculous.
September 27, 1918, around 3:30 p.m., the North End, Boston. Carmen and her pal Tony were heading back from school, making their way through the noisy streets of the neighborhood, Boston's North End. Horse wagons clattered and squeaked, and motor cars honked. A young newsboy shouted out the front page headline. Deadly flu hits Boston. Usually Carmen and Tony would be talking and joking as they zigzagged their way through the packs of people that jammed the streets. They would maybe stop at Ortelli's Bakery and see if they could sweet-talk Mrs. Ortelli into giving them a free creamy cannoli or crunchy biscotti. They always left empty.
What's a cannoli or a biscotti?
Desserts. Like Italian desserts, I think. Maybe we can try it.
Italian.
They always left empty-handed, but they kept trying because anything was possible, right? But today, Tony was in a rotten mood. He walked glumly, skinny shoulders slumped. Carmen had been trying to cheer him up, but nothing was helping. He hates me, Tony moaned. He was their teacher, Mr. Lawrence. No, he doesn't, Carmen said for the 100th time. Mr. Lawrence was the nicest teacher they'd ever met. Over the summer, he'd come back from fighting in the Great War. He'd
What's
been
the Great War?
badly hurt in a bomb attack and couldn't go back into battle.
Isn't the Great War D-Day?
So World War One, right? Isn't that the Great War?
Oh.
So he came home and took a job as a teacher. He had a bad limp, but he acted like it didn't bother him. I'm stupid, Tony continued. No, you're not, Carmen said, rolling her eyes. How many times had she told him he just had to study harder, or maybe even open a book for once? That was why Tony flunked the first big math test of the year. Carmen knew it wasn't the F that upset him. He'd had plenty of those over the years. It was Mr. Lawrence's new idea to keep Tony in at recess so they could play some math games together. Carmen knew Mr. Lawrence was trying to help Tony. Tony thought Mr. Lawrence was trying to torture him. That test was impossible, Tony grumbled now, as they wove around a big pile of horse manure in the street. Well, Carmen said, she'd gotten 100, but she hadn't told that to Tony. She'd carefully folded the test and slipped it into the page of the book. Mr. Lawrence had lent to her The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. The book was about a girl named Dorothy who got sucked into a tornado and dropped down in a strange land called Oz. We watched that.
Yeah, I've watched the animated series too.
Carmen couldn't wait to show the test to Papa. He'd pin her perfect test up on the wall with all the others. Then he'd pat her cheek. This is why we came here to America, he'd say. They'd come here 4 years ago from a little village in Italy. The village was a bountiful place where Papa and Mama's families had lived for hundreds of years. But in 1908, when Carmen was two, a powerful earthquake struck the south of Italy. Entire cities turned to dust in the quake. Minutes later, gigantic tidal waves roared across the land. More than 100,000 people were killed. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Including Mama, who was swept away when the sea rose up. Carmen had only one memory of the terrible day, dim and lazy like a dream.
Hazy.
Thank you. She was clinging to Papa's back as the sea churned all around them. Hold on, Papa had cried. Hold on! Papa's voice had risen above the roaring waves, above the screams of the people all around them. Carmen gripped the Wizard of Oz,
The Wonderful
Wizard of Oz, harder as Tony kicked a rotten core into the gutter.
Apple core.
Oh, thank you. Papa never talked about the earthquake, but growing up in Italy, Carmen had heard the stories from her grandmother, Nona, and reminders of the disaster were everywhere in their village. The crumbling church, the ruined school, the graveyard where Mama was buried. Papa had wanted to stay in the village, but as the years crawled by, he realized there was no